reason I prefer to use
Got it.
Zoom is just because that way I could record the call, and then I usually have the guest also. If you could on your end record your mic signal too,
Yeah.
and then that way,
Do you like
if
it
you,
through Zoom? The Zoom audio quality is okay for you, or would you prefer I use a third-party recording?
yeah, third party recording, and then
Great.
that way, I use the Zoom call plus my recording and your recording to sort of like make a hopefully somewhat studio sounding recording happen in the end.
Perfect. I'm going to use, I would like to shoot out one thing though.
Oh
I
yeah,
have two different channels, two different parts for my audio. One of them would be directly from the mic as it's going right now, and the other one is through my third party. Let's see if this works. Can you still hear me?
yeah,
Which one's better? So
okay.
this is A, and
Uh-huh.
here's B. This would be B.
Oh, they're super similar.
Okay, cool. Great.
Yeah.
I'll use the A then, and then I think I can make an easy enough job of it here. All right, boop, 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 boop. Configure my input. Yeah, how are you doing?
Dude, I'm good. Yeah, how are you?
Awesome. I'm good overall. It's been a pretty hectic, wonderful. I think I'm only going to record my side. Of course, I'm only going to record my side. I think I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
I am.
that
Just
would
my
be the
my current setup.
ideal.
Yeah. So I've just started recording too. All right.
Great.
Yeah. The semester just began. Of course, phone calls right now. It's a good time. Yeah. Semester just began Berkeley, and it's been a whirlwind, super change of life. Being on the East Coast, coming from Los Angeles, and going from being, don't know where the next dollar is going to come from, and to having kind of a jobbity job.
Yeah, how is Berkeley stuff right now? Like I mean, I assume are teaching electronic music there, or are you teaching jazz stuff?
No, no, electronic music and almost all performance classes too. So electronic music
Mm.
performance and technique is
Oh,
my
that's
bag.
cool.
Even though I would love to do more, like production classes and whatnot, but that isn't. They have plenty of that there, and plenty of kind of, yeah. I mean, like I would be so underwater in terms of jazz, even though I have a little bit of that in my back pocket. It's amazing
Mm.
what they're doing at a high level. Like the people they're churning out at the program is absolutely insane. Oh, also in the background, you might hear my child. That's the other huge part of my life right now.
Oh, you
Is
had a
a kid
child
has
like
entered in. I did.
that was recent?
Yeah, like they're 10 months old. So
Oh, dude, congrats. So that
very,
happened like
very
during the pandemic.
right before, if you can
Oh,
imagine the terror of like, oh wow, we're gonna encounter this like maybe this life thing happening, and then like at the same time as even being like in that kind of like, oh, even discovering that we're having a kid, also having the world start to shut down.
mm,
Um, yeah, it made it super bonding with my partner though. It made it really incredible to have this like very concentrated time. I know you probably can sympathize with like, probably being an individual that toured quite a bit and then going from that to not being on the road as a constant, or not having that always be the background noise of every decision is like, oh, I'm going to be gone this weekend, that weekend, this week,
right.
that week. And
Yeah.
suddenly, yeah, you have time different.
Yeah, I definitely found that to be, yeah, super different, change of pace for sure. And I kind of liked it because I always had this, and I mean, I'm starting to get it again. Like I'm starting to fall into that same mind trap again, sort of where
Mm,
um, I feel like I always have to be sort of writing for shows or preparing for shows, and
interesting.
it doesn't give
Yeah.
me like a whole lot of space mentally. I feel like to be truly creative and truly do exactly what I want. Whereas in the pandemic, I was like, I didn't even know if shows are ever going to happen again. Like everyone might, half the world might just die, and shows may or may not be a thing in the future. So I was like, well, I guess I can just make whatever. And just, uh,
I mean, that's a huge amount of freedom afforded, but did you not have any suspicion that we would just pull through? Would we just like the.
I mean, I did, but I wasn't sure. Right, like at the very start, do you remember the first like couple of weeks of the pandemic where like even the CDC wasn't sure what's going on, and like everyone was not, there was no one was sure what was going on. I mean, the CDC didn't even weren't even
Yeah,
sure if
no.
like wearing masks was correct.
Well, I mean, it did seem that kind of that brief, bright moment of both that kind of endless optimism of like, oh, this is just a bad flu. We're just going to get through it. It's not going to be nothing. Maybe we're going to maybe we're going to do some things like what would happen around a SARS type situation that,
Mm,
I think those of us who have toured, we kind of maybe have some insight into what it's like, what was like in Asia, Southeast Asia at that time. of swine flu or SARS or these other like permutations of like what could have been a global pandemic but ended up fizzling out, not quite happening, probably because of the efforts and energy of whatever GMOs or whatnot that were in the background. And now we're discovering like, oh well, when you're profoundly asleep at the wheel and doing nothing, or even like trying to be malfeasant about like a pandemic response, this is what happens. We get global orders of magnitude of a potential extinction level event, and like it could
Yeah,
have just
dude.
like it could have just been some, getting used to wearing a mask for like 2 or 3 weeks and then like having it be nothing is insane.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy, the response from the government and
Mm-hmm.
the World Health Organization and such. They basically were like making a bunch of like completely incorrect statements at the start and then like backpedaling on all of them and then being like, wait, hold on. It turns out this, just like every other, you
Mm-hmm.
know, flu is also airborne. Which, remember, at first I was saying it was transferred via water droplet particles on surfaces,
Totally, there was
and
a
they were
lot
like,
of that.
you should Clorox like all of your surfaces and stuff like that.
I mean, it's like maybe that panoply of best practice and just not knowing any better and just doing everything that's in our arsenal. I can get that, but
Mm.
as we've refined it, it is tough that there's still so much like a lag of information where we still plenty of hocus pocus and otherwise. And from that perspective too of shows, it's like here we are, the harbingers of like people desperately need the event again, and we're probably as it has been kind of talked about, like we're 2022 summer is probably like the soonest that we'll be like fully back to business. But you can see how we're trying to spin wheels and like, hey, our whole gig is to push air
Right.
loudly.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we're in a tough spot this way, increasingly to the awareness of people.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some photos floating around. Did you see the photo of Lollapalooza? That was,
I mean, I've seen some of the output from it, but I don't think I've seen anything specifically that would speak to this directly. But
yeah, that was like a full-fledged like 50,000 person festival or something. There's
sure,
like photos of like drone shots of just like as many people as you can basically fit. It was like a Coachella size thing or something.
sure, sure.
Um,
Yeah, Lollapalooza is a fun event to play, but I only can imagine in this current environment how they would have possibly enforced, negative tests or kind of
yeah,
vaccination proof. Yeah.
they're just not. There's a lot of clubs too that are saying that they are and then are not. Like I had a friend the other day play at a club in Florida, and what he did is he called the club
Mm.
from his hotel before he went, pretending to be a fan that wanted to go to the show. He was like, "You telling me I have to get like a negative test result and wear a mask at this show? That's bullshit." And then the club owner was, or whoever answered the phone was like, "No, no, 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 it's fine. You don't have to
Uh,
do that." And then
I
he was
mean,
like, "All right
Florida,
then."
Florida is actually like many of the states that are Republican controlled or Republican governors.
Mm,
They've actually mandated that you can't do testing. You can't enforce this, and it's going to make it so regressive for the American scene because the people who are still on the ground who need to make a living by touring widely, they're going to have these weird spots where they can't be reliable, or they have to cancel shows, or they have to push things off, or even worse yet, endanger their fans in order to kind of
mm,
just like be a musician in 2021 is a really tough decision I would hope no one would ever have to make. But
right.
you've pivoted to both this podcast, which I'm so appreciative of, to be able to come down and to talk with you. It's been a long time since we last crossed paths, and
Yeah,
also
I think
your production classes in general. Like I know you're always giving out great tips and stuff, so I would assume that kind of became more of what you were spending time during pandemic with.
yeah, definitely. Well, I've been doing that actually since before the pandemic. Like for instance, I've also had the experience of teaching at Berkeley, except I taught at the one in Valencia.
Oh, crazy. Okay,
So
I
like,
didn't know.
yeah, my buddy Ben, who writes music under the name Incanti,
Mm,
he studied at Berkeley in Boston, and then sort of got into teaching at helped develop actually the like uh, sort of sound design course
mm,
there, like the electronic music sound design course, and also electronic music performance. And then he wanted to take like a miniature sabbatical, so I ended up taking over for him
mm.
for a couple of months, and yeah, it was a great experience. So I've had a little bit of experience doing that too. And then I've also, yeah, just got like my website
Mhm.
plus, which effectively is like a Patreon, which really, like, Patreon really took off for artists, and Twitch, I found,
Yeah.
like, during the pandemic, because artists, like, we just have this need to, like, output things, right? You can't just, like, releasing things and, like, giving it to people in exchange for money almost is like this essential other part of writing
Well,
music
if a
is.
tree falls in the woods and nobody hears the sound, does it ever happen? And much the same way, if you put out a release and nobody's there to like resonate with it, is it actually having its desired effect, or you're having an emotional, physical, and sometimes spiritual connection? And so I can totally understand people who are used to DJing and they want to, even if it's just somebody in a chat room, it makes such a huge difference than just, being recorded on a camera and then having it uploaded onto a totally disembodied, non-real time thing. It's a different experience.
Mm.
And so the simultaneity of a Twitch, or the kind of offerings, that more personalized offerings of Patreon. I also launched a Patreon before everything kind of happened, kind of in an effort to try to learn about the space a little bit, and maybe just put up the occasional sample pack or exclusive old song that didn't have a space on Spotify. But it has become so much more important to me to have this kind of level of connection with impassioned people that I would used to have talked with them across a merch table at a show and kind of maybe given them one sharp pointer or gotten their demo or something. And now Patreon is totally that wonderful stand-in for that, like, kind of community space.
Yeah, it's really cool. I feel like how, during the pandemic, we got forced into sort of figuring out how to do a lot of the stuff that we, would do live over the internet, and kind of forced everybody to, like, learn about these new platforms like Discord and Patreon and Twitch and stuff like that, which was awesome, I think, because I mean, it would have taken a lot longer, I think, for all of those platforms to get as widely adopted as they did otherwise. Not saying that the pandemic was like, it's amazing that this happened. It obviously was not, but like there was, some little silver linings there, I think.
Well, it was an accelerator of a lot of different of ills and good. And I would say one of the ills that I encountered, and which is not wholly evil, but it left a bad taste in my mouth, was like NFT kind of as a
Mm.
culture, as a speculative culture. It's like it's an incredible thing on paper in terms of solving some of the inefficiencies, inequalities that happen in the streaming space, especially.
Mm.
But then in terms of just like making art on the blockchain, God, I don't need another email trying to get me as a convert, even after being a little bit in the space, and just discovering the kind of malfeasance by some of the players. It's really tough, and that's something I got super accelerated by everything that was happening. And not wholly evil, but gosh, really tough.
Yeah, yeah, I've been constantly getting emailed by NFT companies who are like,
Mhm.
"Hey, would you like to essentially give us your art so our platform has any form of tangibility associated with it?" Because a lot of I feel like the NFT world, they're basically like begging for their tokens to have some artistic tangibility associated to it.
I mean, it
And
gives it a whole different dimension of meaning, right? Because right now, like, the punks and the monkeys are winning out in that space, the very kind of limited collectible witness thing, and everybody recognizes how small-minded that is, right? Like, or especially when you can have editions made by a neural network and like endless supply of them. Like, what's the value in like
right. Yeah, I definitely do not understand the NFT thing. Like, I understand what they're trying to do technically and whatnot, but I don't understand it conceptually. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Um, and then on top of that, you got like the environmental impact of it all and all that kind of
which is
stuff.
probably should be overshadowing everything, but it did get pushed down quite a bit in the conversation because people needed to make ends, people needed to make money, and goodness, yeah, art on
Yeah.
commerce is like oil and water, and but we found a way to make that into a salad dressing that everybody loves so much, seemingly. And yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, I think what it was is that everyone just got like those greedy money eyes when they saw Grammatic make like, 50, 60 grand in a single night, and EPROM made like $15,000, and who else, like
Jimmy Edgar's done
Beeple.
very well, and Beeple, of
Yeah.
course, is the ultimate. But
Yeah,
especially Beeple being like the background noise for every show that's been since, like, they've been doing their freebie giveaways. Every visual artist's probably like either is directly using Beeple's makes or has like like at least the aesthetic has been picked up everywhere. And like to have them get theirs, quote unquote, like their daily drops being assembled into this big $69 million piece, of sales for whatever the official Christie's or whatever that thing is.
Mm.
And it's just so funny that it's like selling that aesthetic of basically the aesthetic of the underground bass show for $69 million.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the other crazy thing is the person who bought that doesn't actually own people's art. They own a hash of his art on the blockchain.
Well, and in some ways, like since Beeple always was giving it out for free, there was never an ascribed value to it, much like our own music in some ways. And so this is where blockchain is kind of interesting. I find is that like we do a song and we give it these dimensions that we give it the dimension of like a top line and a harmony is all you can copyright in traditional copyright systems. Like what we call the mechanical copyright would be different, but in terms of the songwriter's copyright, all we can do is this top line and then the kind of the overall vibe of the song. And it's so nebulous and it's so flawed, and everyone knows that the copyright system is flawed. And the song itself is just whatever you can kind of sell it for, but largely the marketplace has decided that that's like 99 cents to $1.29, at least in American terms. That's our ascribed value for a song. And here are these people who are like, well, what if we try this model of basically creating scarcity in other ways, such as like the NFT idea? And
Mm,
that is just, like, why not, I guess. And you have plenty of examples of physical media going for thousands of dollars because of scarcity, and like, why not the song itself? And but then of course it's all hocus pocus, magic make.
right. Yeah, I think blockchain stuff is interesting in the sense that the problem it's essentially trying to solve at its root is deleting middlemen from the equation, right? Like you have things like like DoorDash and Uber and all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff where you feel comfortable giving somebody 20 bucks, like a stranger 20 bucks over the internet to drive you somewhere. And the reason why you feel comfortable with that is because there's this large corporation in between the two of you, like essentially mitigating risk on both ends, like mitigating risk that you're going to lose your money if they don't show up, or if they don't show up, that like you'll have some sort of retribution for that. And then on the other end, on the driver's end, you're star rated on a system, and there's a good chance that you're not going to murder them whilst they're driving you somewhere. This middleman
They
situation in
Yeah.
a case like Uber makes a lot of sense. And I feel like blockchain, like NFTs and smart contracts and all of that kind of stuff is getting to the point where it's like maybe can solve some of those problems. But I think people are like missing that point completely.
Well, especially because like we've been solving this problem. I don't know. I don't know how long you've been touring for, and I assume that you have been at it long enough, maybe that you have a similar experience as myself, where the DIY scene was a huge part of the community that brought me forward, and that I was able to have, thankfully, some time in, to the degree that you made a show happen because you somebody told somebody that you were worth booking, and you would kind of, it didn't always work out as a system, and obviously there was lots of flaws, but this kind of idea of like a community that holds each other accountable, and a community that also is looking out for the better good of not only the other artists involved or the venues, but also the participants in terms of an audience. And so you have this like multi-pronged, like large, sprawling, messy community that has to self-govern, and it's totally doable at even large scales. It just takes time, which is something that people don't like to spend. It's like more valuable than the money they're using. And it also takes a community that really is willing to have like hard conversations about accountability and kind of moving forward. Like, if a venue isn't worthy of being played because it has a bad sound system, or it doesn't have safety protocols, it's like having artists be like, I don't trust this, don't play there, don't work for this person. And
Right.
that the community taking that seriously, and not doing it no matter what kind of dollars are flashing in front of them. And so I appreciate that there are like, it's like we see a lot of this where Amazon came along and like outdid the bookstore because they were willing to go cheaper and harder, and people responded to that. But it's such a base level solution to what is a much more complex problem. And so equally, the Ubers of the world are being this lubricant, but really I just would love it if we could do it from a ground up situation, and like just take the lessons we learned by being DIY musicians or DIY makers, and just like scale that. But of course that doesn't scale so easy. It's a tough combo.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree. Um, Going back to copyright law and stuff like that, how did I know your tune experience has been sampled by like some pretty big artists like Madlib and Drake and
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
How did the copyright work for that? Because I mean, I assume you recorded that accordion in your studio, right?
Yeah, totally. It was actually a record. So my record invention was my kind of my first official record, and it was really plunderphonic. There was a lot of different sampling going on. I used a lot of records and other things, but that one song experience, weirdly enough, and probably the reason why Madlib responded to it the way they did, way he did, was because I was an all original recording. Like it was me really with the instruments. I borrowed my friend Ben Wendell to play some saxophone on that piece. I even sang poorly on the song. And I did all these things inexplicably. It ended up being like a four-handed accordion part effectively. So there's all these things about it that make it odd. But since it's all original, it was always in my back pocket. And when Mad Villain was happening, and the whole reason they actually ended up doing accordion is kind of circuitous, but it's kind of a fun story in of itself. I've talked about it in the past, but when accordion got put together, it was really like a handshake kind of deal. They hit me up right before the record was coming out because it had to be re-recorded, and they it was kind of them. And just because I was kind of in the sphere of Stone's Throw, I knew some of the people behind it. But I'm the only credited sample on the Mad Villain record. If you look in like the booklet, which of course nobody
Mm.
looks in booklets anymore, but if you look in the booklet, it credits my sample, and I was able to be in the music video and all this stuff. But it was really just like, oh, this is a really cool experience. I'm really happy to be part of this project. But because the song had such a longer life of many people, like, I don't know why that song in particular, there's a lot of excellent music on that record, but they responded to that one song pretty viscerally. And so not only like the Drakes and kitties and like Donnell Jones and Trippy Reed or Red or whatever, and like all these other people were just like did their thing on it. And it has meant that my exertion of the copyright got a little bit messy for a while. Like I had to bring in a lawyer for a few instances of people like kind of maliciously using it or just kind of like running with it, which is, in many ways, like I'm an artist that samples. Like I don't like being sued by other people, and I also really don't like it when art gets litigated.
Mm.
But when people are malicious, it's one thing if somebody comes up and goes, "Hey, I'm doing this." Like I've almost always given people free right to do, or just like appreciated when people will break me off a little bit. But it's like it's really easy to say yes. It's really easy to be like go for it. It's much more malicious when people are trying to get one over on you and they're like doing it on purpose. It's like why? It's
Right.
like we're all connected in this music world. Like it
Yeah,
isn't,
especially if it's somebody like Drake, right? Who's like getting
mhm.
fucking, I think he's one of the most played artists on Spotify. Um,
Makes it a
yeah,
really easy conversation, and it's not hard to reach anybody. And yeah, I mean, I had one situation where some people would use the song thinking it was just the Madlib version. Of course, then the kind of like weird rights that the way they trickle down becomes hard. Like it was used on that show Masters of None in like the background music in a bar,
right.
and that took a little bit of like figuring out how that was going to be attributed. But we live in a messy world, so it's all. I don't want to play cleanup. I would rather much more make music, but
Mm.
I guess
Well,
that's
that's where
part of.
NFTs could be good, right? Like that
Mhm.
could, if everything was logged on a blockchain or something, that could kind of facilitate some of this cleanup shit
Yeah,
and get.
but then it just requires everything being watermarked and like
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I love the anarchy and chaos of just like here's your samples, here's your thing, make some sounds. If people like it, enjoy it, they could like the freemium model. Like I know it's not the most revolutionary thought anymore, but remember when Bandcamp came around and like
Hmm.
Radiohead, it wasn't on Bandcamp, but it was basically the same model of like Radiohead did that record and they were like pay what you want. And they were very successful, of course, because of Radiohead, and people were like, wanting to hit them off. But like this pay you want model, like, how have you done any of that with your records? Have you done any of that, like,
Yeah, the
kind of
first like 5 years of releasing albums and stuff, I never accepted a set price for it. I was always like, pay what you want. And then I was
cool?
like, okay, I have to actually make money. So,
Well, I mean, I assume too, it's like one of those things where people then encounter your music much more in the wild than they would normally.
right,
That small barrier of 99 cents. It's like even though people will so freely throw dollars at their barista or like,
right.
spend $1 million on a fancy feast that lasts just for lasts on their palate just for a moment, and then they will really be hard pressed to like break away with $1.50 for like some lossless WAV on like it's
Like a digital thing. Yeah.
something
I
that could
think,
conceivably last forever and change their life. But they're like, I don't know. I'm
yeah,
scared.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
like when the digital mediums came around, people had a hard time with that because they were like, it's just a digital wave that I'm paying for. Like, I can't, how can I spend my money on that? I'm not even getting like a, paper disc, like a, little piece of aluminium that I can, or plastic that I can chuck in a CD player, that will sound worse and maybe skip and, maybe I'll scratch it and it will never play back again. Or,
Yeah, I'll leave it in my car for 2 months and then I'll never be able to play it again because it'll melt. But
right.
the physical thing, we haven't really conditioned for the kind of the way that that has value versus the digital, and that's a kind of a failure of culture. Yeah, again, just going back to the song, like we've kind of reduced songs down to these weird metrics and kind of said that they're important because they have a unique melody, which of course we all know is like the most false thing. It's just like a all melody and all like harmony kind of go back to like these same precepts of what like 12 tones can do anyways. It isn't like anything too new in the field, but like that being said, yeah, it would be nice if we could like solve this completely and just be able to move forward with like the active creation. Kind of encourage
Yeah.
students to do that often, like at school. Now that I'm increasingly teaching students to kind of find an artistic voice, it's so amazing to be like, yeah, everything y'all do, it's been all done before, and yet at the same time, no one's ever done it like you have, so nothing's ever been done before. Like, just square those two things, and you'll be fine.
Right. Yeah. That's a hard thing to square though, right? It's like, this idea, you'll have days sometimes where you're just like, what's the point? It's been,
Mhm.
and then other days where you're like, holy shit, I'm like breaking new ground. And like, really, neither is true ever.
Always, and I love that. Every time people, I talked to a fair group of producers specifically about their writer's block. They're like, I can't figure out a melody, I can't do a harmony, I can't do a drum part, like I'm totally blocked right now. And it's like, well, A, have you looked back at your old tracks and both laughed at how ridiculous they are, but also like how genius they are simultaneously, like always, like how cobbled together and how naive and how you could never even do that again. Like if you tried to sit down and make the track, it would never quite have its visceral feeling that something old might have had. And then on the flip side, it's like just sit down and like the equipment will like tell you everything it needs to do. Like just if you just figure out how to do a feature that you've been putting off, like that'll be a whole like million tracks right there.
Mm.
It's just funny how yeah, sometimes we
I feel like
often
it's
have all the
just
tools intuitively and we just yeah choose to ignore.
right. Like the ego gets in the way or whatever. That whole
Mm-hmm.
I'm the shit versus I'm shit
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's like that these two extremes are like the same shitty part of your brain essentially fighting your creative process.
Well, and oftentimes, I mean, one of the things we ignore is like we do all this music stuff as self-soothing or as some kind of like internal psychology where there was something that pushed us. I oftentimes joke about this like as performers. Usually I think about this as like there was something that got you up on a stage at some point in your life, some public speaking gig or some kind of early show. And rather than most people who were like deterred and like hated the experience and went away, much like kind of somebody with a gambling addiction, sadly, we got on that stage and it was went terrible, but we were like, we love the failure of this and we're doubling down and doubling down and doubling down till eventually you make it work for you and that it can be something you live in. But it oftentimes does come from like a usually a terrible experience or something hard that then the brain doesn't compute as being like, okay, we're gonna just put this away and never do it again.
Mm.
But we sign up for it for life.
Yeah, I think those terrible experiences, which I to some degree have almost at every show I play,
Mm,
is like really important because it's what drives me to keep trying to make my set better. Like I was playing a show in Denver like on the weekend actually,
mm,
and there was just like a bunch of mixes in the set where I was like, oh, that could have just been better, and like, and I know like nobody else gave a shit. Like at the
mhm.
end, everyone was like, oh, that was great. But like in my own mind, I was just like, man, I could like execute all of this like a lot cleaner, and it just yeah leaves me always with this like kind of rotten feeling, which is like not a nice feeling, but it's like the response I always have to that feeling is I could just improve on this and make it better.
Well, and that's fascinating too, especially with the conversation that's happening in the sport world right now. I don't know if you're familiar at all with what's going on, especially in professional tennis, where you have some of these like really A-list players that are now demurring from basically playing because it's like, I'm not, when I lose, I'm not happy. When I win, I'm not happy.
Mm,
Why am I participating in this sport at this high level? And I think, there were some musicians where that, maybe like yourself, maybe there's a similar conversation to be had about what is satisfaction and what's the end goal. And of course, often for us, I mean, maybe in sport, it's much more critical that you win or lose, but the only dimension is the game. For us, we could be producing, we could be performing, we could be talking about our craft and sharing it in so many different ways. I don't know for you if performance is such like a really important measure in that. I mean, and I think people really do benefit from your shows. They really do benefit from seeing your perspective and hearing it presented loudly and like in the way that you do. But yeah, I mean, it may just be one of the aspects of your craft that you're exploring, and that that we're really lucky to have that dimensionality. But we probably could be used to have more people. Like, do you know Dim Light, the artist? Dim Light.
I do not.
They are I want to say a Swiss artist. They are awesome, really talented, incredible beat maker, like all time. Like if you gave me a top 5 beat makers, like they would be like top 3 at least, if not number 1. Just insanely talented, but like doesn't play shows. Doesn't
I
really
like
have a
Boards
presence
of
online.
Canada as well and stuff like that.
Exactly, exactly. And I think Boards of Canada, maybe played a handful, right? Or, Christ, one of the members of Boards of Canada, has done some further things, or Associated Acts has done some further things. But it is that thing of like, or like Burial, perfect other example. Like just
Mm.
maybe some people just don't play shows, and that should be cool. But obviously, it's hard in our world, in our line of work, to make ends there.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I always wonder, like, I mean, Burial's album Arc, what was it, Archangel? Whatever, the one with Archangel on it. I
Yeah,
guess it's like his only real album, right? Like, um,
Untrue, I think is the name of the record, right? I think.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I've always been curious how he's like gone so long without doing a show. He must have a job, right? Because I don't think like that one record could have funded his entire life.
Yeah, I think he works at an EA GameStop. I think, or like, I'm just kidding. I don't know, but like, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's.
I mean, no one knows who he is, right? So like, it's possible
I think
that.
at various times people have kind of known who they are. And certainly the Code Nines of the world and whatnot have a main line, but or the kind of work they did with other producers, Fortet, I think Tom York, or these whatever else, and but equally, like, I just love the fact that you can have people where we can prize them as artists that don't need to have that hold that space. And equally, like, there should be probably more electronic performers that can DJ other people's music and don't have to, they themselves don't have to be producers. Even though I don't like ghostwriters, I don't like this our idea of artists who claim to be the producer and have like tons of ghostwriters. And you probably have done ghostwritten work for other people. I only can imagine. But at the same time, like, why not have people who can be just excellent performers that can hold those shapes and do that thing?
But what's your problem with ghostwriting?
Just that, it's like it creates a false system where people think that what they see on stage is the kind of the genius dilemma of holding somebody up on a platform and not seeing the kind of the beautiful but complex truth of how we all are cobbled together associations of other music and other ideas, and we
Mm.
happen to put these some people up on these pedestals that just don't belong there, and they kind of play into the mystique of it. And it's just like, I know it's the mythologies are part of what people are performing into, but I would rather it all be, if somebody's going to play, like, I don't know, I don't want to shoot out particular EDM acts for what their sins are, but it's much better if we lived in a messy world full of creative people that were ever expanding, rather than like, or it's perfect, like Lady Gaga is a great example. Like, we know there's a team of musicians behind them. We
Right.
know it's
Yeah.
a complex
She's
system that creates that web work of a pop person being elevated, and kind of, they're exploring it, and they're kind of, it may not be the most loud thing in the mix, but it's there, versus some other EDM. Oh God, should we just talk about it? But I don't know. It's like, it
I mean,
just
if you
seems
want, I
silly.
mean, I know the person who produces Lady Gaga is Tom Norris, who produces like a bunch of shit. He does like I mean, I don't think he produces a lot, like for Zed and stuff. I think he might just do like the production slash like adds like some
Well,
additional
Blood
stuff.
Pop as well,
Yeah.
right? Like, Blood Pop is like the main producer of a lot of the material, and right, and but like, we all know that at some level, versus some of these EDM acts where it's like they're the producer. Like, the vast majority of people think that they're the person because it's their name on all aspects, and there's never even like writer's credit given elsewhere or whatever. It isn't like a mess when you see the record. It isn't a mess of like 27 names on a track.
Well, I
It's
think
just
all
like
those
who they sampled
people,
and.
those people would be getting like hooked up via their PROs, and
Yeah.
they'd be like written in as a writer. I'm pretty sure on the back end, but I think people don't like to see that either. They kind of it's like seeing the inside mess of a Max MSP patch or something. It's like sometimes you just want that nice GUI on the outside, and you
But
just
that's what
want
I
to be
think. If
able.
we just sold them as artists, we sold them as people who were, performers of excellence. But even the sad truth is a lot of these are the same kind of faces that have been going around since like the late 90s, early aughts. And they have large industries of management and bookers, and they're kind of, people are relying on these people commercial success. And so even though they're not great performers, the vast majority of DJs are not great performers. They're just there, and they've learned their pantomime, and they have huge pyrotechnics and like giant LED walls, and the visual artists should be the ones that are like top lining and like getting all the pay. The Beeples, again, going back to Beeple, should be the ones that
Right.
are super uplifted, but it's just not the case, because we still need the artifice of that one DJ who's like pumping their fist at the, or, like telling the people when the drop's happening or whatever.
Right.
And it just feels unfair to me. And also, of course, they crowd out new voices, right? Like we have someone like More Kismet on their way up, and they are awesome as a performer, and they have some great production chops, and we should be celebrating them. And they are getting some shine. It's great, but they should be, super ascendant. But obviously, top line main stage stuff is really hard to break into.
Mm.
As much as they seem like they're on a hot one right now, I could easily see that fizzling out, just because, the EDM stars of the world just want to do another run around, get their cash grab.
Right. Yeah, to some degree, though, there's also something to be said, I think, for those artists having a vision
Mhm.
and pulling this team of people together in this particular position that they're in, both financially and clout wise, to be able to pull these certain teams together, and then putting together these like amazing experiences for people,
Yeah.
right? Like Excision's Paradox tour, or Amon Tobin's crazy Izam thing. It's like, a lot of other artists don't have A, the budget for this, or B, like know even where to start, like contacting the
Well,
teams to do this. But
you,
they put together these incredible experiences for people, and I think that is also like kind
but
of cool and
you're,
important.
yeah, no, you're talking about visionaries though, and the vast majority of what I'm kind of talking about are people who are not pushing the new or pushing it forward, or even like Daft Punk's Pyramid, which is, Daft Punk being a group of an assemblage of sample material, but still had a vision for what a performance could be like. But you have people who are like two or three gens behind that, and they're kind of just like riding coattails or heels.
Mm.
And you're absolutely right though too. I should be more nuanced about it. I just kind of get my fist at the sky sometimes about how.
The old man yells at cloud.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
I may not be a man, but I can at least shake my fist a bit. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I guess like let's move on to some other stuff. Actually, we could stay on performances. Speaking of performances, you had that like Archimedes thing, right? Like that thing
Yeah,
with all the mirrors, which was fucking awesome. For people who don't know what that
thank
was,
you.
it was basically like a bunch of, I don't know, like 10-inch by 10-inch mirrors or whatever, like put on these like servo motors, it looked like, that were all like rotating in unison with one another, and when you shone lights on it, it just looked
Yeah.
really crazy. There was like all this insane reflection going on and stuff, which is kind of genius, because it's like essentially taking what's already there on the stage, just all of these lights and stuff that are going to
Mhm.
be there anyway, and just like doubling the power of all of them. What was, I guess, like the process like for coming up with that conceptually,
Yeah.
plus the cost of it, and like the touring logistics, and all of that stuff, and I guess the other question would be, do you have plans to like tour with it again, or was that just sort of like one installation? And
No, no, it was interesting. So I got approached. This would be 2011. Prior to 2011, I got approached to do the Coachella that year. So I know I was going to be on one of the main stages, at a prime slot, and knowing this in advance and kind of feeling the direction of where a lot of EDM was at that time. Dubstep was in ascendance, especially the American sound, and a lot of what we were seeing at that time was shows that were, again, full of pyrotechnics and full of shock and awe, but they would oftentimes diminish the performer. Like the less I mean, no offense to Amon Tobin, I absolutely adore Isan, and I think what they did indeed was visionary, but often, and this is a critique I know has been said before, but the times that the installation worked the worst was when you saw Amon Tobin.
Right.
It was like the video mapping was so revolutionary in the kind of big thought of it, but then you still had to have the artifice of the person performing in it. And
Mm.
in some ways, I would have preferred if it was just a complete movie that ignored the kind of the need to have someone at a DJ booth and kind of moving things around. And you just had like the complete vision of like what would have been like a really transgressive performance that kind of undid a lot of the notion of like facing a certain way, even though the sound system is all around you and all these different aspects of that we've been kind of ingrained in our experience. But so hyping the performer was always been my bag. Like I always love using controllers and kind of including the audience's reactions. And so the idea of using a larger light show, I just couldn't for the life of me like figure out how I did that without like losing some either this instantaneousness. Like when I looked at video systems, they almost always have delays, at least at that time. And then also in addition to that, any amount of LED walls, they're just like this big old production to like move in and out and all these things and like
Also
end
just
up
crazy
crowding.
expensive as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so I worked with like the most hodgepodge group of people. This one person, Emmanuel Bayard, who was this visionary that did shows in Manchester, England. And it's one of those things where I think if I had approached like a large touring company, they would have laughed at me and they would have said it was impossible. Just the cost would have been astronomical and it just been like this is impossible to move around. This could be like a show at the Barbican or like one off, but it would have been like, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds or dollars.
Why would they think that though? Because when I looked at it, I was like, "That's genius! You could just
Mhm.
stack all those mirrors up in a foam box.
Yeah.
That's one Pelican case of mirrors, and then like the I don't exactly know how the structure worked behind it, but surely it's foldable or something."
It was very modular. We were able to do different setups and the servo motors were really awesome. But the reason why is because the skill set it takes to do robotics of any kind is really specialized. And so even just
Mm.
from a standpoint of envisioning it, and then even the smallest amount of fabrication would have been really hard if it had been the music industry. But because Emmanuel Bayer had a friend that was in the car industry, the automotive industry,
Mm.
and the person he sourced, this gentleman named David, was just so like maybe frustrated musician, but just frustrated automaker basically, and was just down to be a mad scientist. And so just
Mhm.
the three of us basically did almost all the fabrication and needed from concept to execution. And it's just amazing what's possible with a few people who just don't know any better. And we totally didn't know better in the sense that also like it did cost quite a bit of money. And to be totally frank, it cost me about £50,000,
Oh
but
wow.
I was able to make that up with a really strong touring mindedness. And although I walked away from that tour with like nothing in pocket, it
Right.
was an incredible run of shows and
Mm.
culminating at a Coachella that, you know, everything was beset by technical errors and learning moments, but it was presented something I think that was wholly different than what people had witnessed before. And also to me, one of the most successful moments that was inadvertent but was great at the show was that when the mirrors not only flashed around and showed some of the lighting in unique ways or myself performing, it would also show the audience's faces and kind of put a direct reflection back, even if just for a moment as the thing twisted around and kind of gave people insight, they could see themselves dancing or enjoying in ways that, you know, just doesn't get highlighted too often. And, you know, maybe people don't
Yeah.
want to see that. They're kind of looking for a disbanding of reality rather than reinforcing.
Right. Right.
But it was really special to tour with. And yeah, even though so I think when I talked to a few other people and I've done other shows since, sometimes simpler, sometimes different, nothing has ever quite reached those heights. I
Yeah.
did a
Do you,
wonderful show with spinning lights and spinning strings to do these like beautiful physical formed animations. It was great. And then also another one that used like a recursive video kind of uh, setup that was with Time Boy specifically, who does a lot of work with Flying Lotus. Awesome shows, awesome different visual shows, but in the end, yeah, I think my crazy machinations have been met with the reality that's just like, dang, it's hard to go on tour with people. It's hard to like take more than like you and a sound person out on the road. I just don't even have any concept how bands do it, much less,
oh yeah, they just
you know.
make like no money essentially. I think like the way bands do it, like Periphery, right? Like I know
Mhm.
the guys in that band quite well, and
Mm.
essentially what they've told me is like touring is basically just a business card for them to like take on outside ventures
Mm.
in the software world and whatnot when they get home, and then they said, and this is how I looked at Bandcamp when it first came around too.
Mm.
This pay what you want thing for me was just like a way to accrue fans to remonetize those fans in a different way. So
Mm.
you basically like essentially get the fans using this business card of a show or a free release or something like that. And then from there, you're able to go like, all right, you're now my fan. Like now, would you like to give me money for a different thing?
I mean, and I
um,
appreciate that, but I do think there, and this is where I totally agree with you, but it's interesting where it's like the visceralness of a show, where if you get person at the right juncture in their life, at the right moment in their like adolescence, often they will be your fan for life, right? Like they will have some
Mhm.
awareness of you, much less like fandom for you forever. But because the show is the arbiter of that, like if you don't tour it and keep it kind of in their memory space, it will like fade differently. They'll buy a record and they'll be like, this isn't the thing that I did that one time.
right.
Or, you know, maybe they'll be reignited, and certainly people who are real music involved or like listening learners or whatever the thing is that kind of gets them excited about it. It's hard to monetize again and again a song that isn't that sweet spot, whereas they would just buy the record over and over again if it just was slightly different each time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you have to sort of, in a way, I guess, balance. And this is sort of going into the original conversation we are having about how Corona sort
Mhm.
of got rid of that anxiety. But yeah, you have to kind of, in a way, balance that anxiety of knowing that you almost have to be doing the same recycled things over and over again versus doing completely fresh things.
Unless you
Because you,
hook them in originally on the concept that is going to be chaos every time, and
mm,
then
or
you
unless
have,
we live in a non-capitalist society.
oh my gosh, imagine that. Imagine that. But here I
Yeah.
am too. Like I'm selling people on a higher education. Like, you know, Berkeley's not a cheap place to go.
Mm,
And I know that, you know, oftentimes the success there isn't so much what they're going to be learning, but it's the people to the left and right of them. They're going to be meeting super talented musicians that aren't necessarily from the same headspace. And that's probably going to be what guarantees their success way more than like what I teach them in like an Ableton class.
right.
But that's okay.
Uh, so with your performances, you use the monome, and I've
Mhm.
forever seen you using that thing. And for people who don't know what it is, it's kind of, I believe the one you use is the 16 by 16, right?
Mhm.
Is it?
Totally 256. Yeah, 256 buttons.
Yeah. So I guess like the design of it is sort of sort of like an APC 40, but without everything else. It's just the grid of buttons. So I love the design of them. They're really clean. Like
Yeah,
there's just a wooden box with an aluminium faceplate with just a bunch of buttons. And
totally.
I think when I saw you playing, I played after you at some show in Miami once, and I think I remember seeing MLR on your screen.
Totally. Yeah.
Do you still use MLR to play with the Monome Live?
When I use the monom, so I've also like I've kind of changed up my craft a little bit now. I have like a separate show that's all modular, and
Oh,
I
cool.
really enjoyed the difference of that. And I use even the modular in kind of similar ways, like I'm doing sample based work, but with different outcomes. But yeah, with the monom, I use a version of MLR that was developed for Ableton, so it's a Max for
Mm,
Live patch, even though it still uses some clever JavaScripting to get it so that it's persistent and not like, you know, kind of doing some of the things that happen with Ableton that can make Ableton less useful in that regard. But yeah, it's still like the basic bones of MLR that I've been using since 2003, if you
oh
can
wow.
believe that. Yeah, same kind of vibe. Brian Crabtree and what what he invented is still so incredibly resonant. It's amazing. I feel such a beneficiary of that like weird brief moment in 2002 when I met them and like just saw them executing like just basically real time sample flipping at a time when that was like really scarce. And still to this day, like vigorous, you know, movement of real material is not that easy to do. And it's just
Mm.
it boggles my mind that we haven't like cracked this nut yet. That there isn't like
It's so
something.
difficult, right?
Yeah.
To live electronic music is just this crazy fucking thing. That's yeah, it hasn't quite reached the level of live instrumentation yet in terms of how I guess in what's the word like just sort of on the fly it can be.
Mhm.
Speaking of which, when you do these monome sets, like how much pre-prep is required to get all the songs in there you want to play and get them chopped up on this MLR thing and like versus winging it, you know, like
Yeah, it
what's the
depends on the
balance like
nature of the
there?
show. Like it can be totally winging it. I've done plenty of like more experimental where I'm not caring about perfect sync. I'm not caring about necessarily like sonically satisfying outcomes. I just really want the spirit of the thing to be like really chop and screw and move. And like however fast I can get my hands going is what the thing is. But what more often happens, especially for shows where there is an expectation of like, hey, what is like people can yell out a song and I can try to see if I can drop it in, or if people can be, you know, we live in a still a very BPM like kind of rigid space where people just don't know how to move or dance to tempos they're not like involved in,
Mm.
which is so bizarre, right? Like you'd be playing 150 and then you go down to 140 and they're just like, I don't know what to do anymore with my limbs. Like, just like be cool about it and you'll get there. But yeah, but still, like you can lose people real easy if you go out of pocket. So I sometimes like to do a thing where I'll like be in a collection of a space, and that takes a little bit of pre-organization in terms of like, well, what do I want to explore sound wise? What are some useful things like just straight up DJ tools that I can rely on? And it, thinking about it from a DJ set standpoint can give some freedom. And then finally, from a molecular standpoint, there's just some samples that are just fun to play on your fingers. The Amen break is a perfect example. Like it's
Right.
just fun to manipulate. Like it gives you a visceral reaction to the crowd. There's some understanding and organization of what that genre can mean. It pays homage to the originators that I am so I owe so much. And so it's fun to mine that territory as well. And then EPROM, just mostly other EPROM tracks, and that's it. That's it. I'm
Yeah,
done.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so yeah, the arm man break and EPROM.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually saw him recently. He's got a crazy show at the moment, crazy
Mhm.
visual show, and uh, yeah, I've asked him to come on the podcast a few times. I think I annoyed him by asking him questions about free will on Twitter, and he was like, "I can't believe you believe in this." Speaking of which, what's your thoughts on free will, but like versus
which like
determinism?
yeah, no, I am fully like I am a believer and practitioner of a certain form of magic, which determinism is very much part of,
Mm,
right? Even though the idea of free will is a fine one, and I think it's just part of commerce as well. There's this wonderful idea that we have agency, which is useful, and the idea of empowering agency to make cool is fine, but it doesn't serve my purposes. And I really like this other entity, and I most often esteem it as music that I am taking cues from, and I'm trying to make what is like a very like be very diligent about my listening, and also be a compassionate listener who is then trying to make decisions that are kind and merciful in a world that is cruel and abject.
mm.
So, it, and that, I mean that's kind of the spirit of things, to
Right.
reduce it down to like
Oh yeah,
some
we can
sentences.
get into that stuff. I mean, like obviously, based on your name and like the name of your show, Archimedes and such. Like
Yeah.
you're obviously into Greek mythology.
Hmm.
So like what are you drawing from that? I guess like I assume that's kind of maybe where your inspiration also comes from this belief in magic as well.
There's a lot of different traditions of magic, but the artifice, the idea of the creation, especially one that has existed and will exist, and we can source into, we can kind of dip our ladle into, and kind of drink, um, with the awareness and knowledge that we also are corrupting ourselves through that knowledge, is part of many magic traditions, and especially not the modern version, but like the traditional version of the Order of the Golden Dawn, which like really was trying to source itself from magical traditions that weren't Judeo-Christian, not Kabbalah-esque, and whatnot, are really fascinating by the sense that you have a system that is based on kind of knowledge and study, but also based on intuition and practical magic rather than just like the kind of hermetic or scholarly versions of that. Um, and so to also realize the potency and power of what we're doing as musicians, like when we intone, when we make music, like we're in a temple space, we're like making sacred ground underneath us, like we're doing heavy lifting, but it can really be for stupid reasons, and people really get it twisted often. um
Yeah, I
and
think
and
that's
yeah.
yeah, I think that's true. But I also think it's like if you're actually like a very active listener and a very like you put a lot of effort into telling the difference between what is kind of being done for the right reasons and what is not. It becomes very easy, I think, to tell when you listen to a piece of music, like whether or not it's being made for the right reasons or not, or whether it's being made literally just because, I guess, like for function, right?
Mhm.
Like to be played at shows or to impress somebody or to, for these egotistical reasons versus whether or not it's being made for these truly passionate reasons.
Yeah, and I mean, I also don't think myself as a reliable narrator. I don't necessarily put myself in the position of knowing things. I do my best to sort it out in the moment, and then try to be kind to myself when I do make erroneous ideas. And I mean, also I will share too, and this is something that I've held for a while, is like my self knowledge has been a really devious path where like for a long time I felt myself to be very and very masculine. And then to be able to admit to myself that over the years, like and through countless songs, like I was tattletaling on myself as being non-binary in ways that I was just deaf to myself because I was indeed putting my ear out elsewhere and like not allowing it to come to be like self-listening, and how errorful that was because it really affected a lot of my, like it gave me a lot of dysmorphia later in life when I just denied what was kind of constantly abundantly being said, and I just didn't, yeah, I wasn't paying attention to what I had to say in some ways.
Right. Yeah, it's easy to be a fallible narrator for sure. I think when we have this again capitalist society in place, right? Like there's such reward for doing things a certain way,
Mhm.
and such punishment for doing things a certain way that it is hard to trust yourself on some decisions because there's this reward versus not.
Well,
Uh,
but isn't that kind of weird to think that there is ever a reward or ever a punishment? Like we're very temporary in this existence, and that kind of idea of, yeah, that there's that. I mean, I would like to think that there's recourse. I'd like to think that there's like outcomes, but it is hard sometimes to just imagine the possibility when we're fooling and like we're fooling around in this kind of sacred space and we're kind of messing with the building blocks. But to think that we're ever amounting to anything is a very egotistical idea. And yet at the same time, like how do we not try to find value and meaning in our actions? It's
mm,
just tough sometimes.
right. Yeah, it's extremely hard to get past the ego of like me and what I'm doing in this reality and the body I'm in and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
And yet at the
yeah.
same time, like I love my phone and I'll play games. I play so many games, not only on my phone but in life. And like it, we're all testing territory. We're all playing with our reality and toying with the options available to us. And I do esteem like those people, those like weird esoteric creative crazies who like have broken through and they're like completely of energy and light and just like eating air and or whatever, the not a breatharian but kind of that vibe, and like the people who are really crackpot really appeal to me, and yet I keep on coming to different conclusions, and like I'm
Mm.
trying to understand why I'm so like hooked on this reality, and like
Mm.
just I mainline it constantly, like it's my it's my addiction is just like waking up the next day and having the same things repeat, getting on that train and doing that thing and trying to push the rock up a hill and very Sisyphean, like getting my liver eaten out and getting going back to mythology, like yeah, it's abundant, and yet I'm like, yeah, I'm an addict for the redundancy.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of built into being a human, right? We just have
Mm,
this like ingrained thing that's been pushed into us for like fuck millions of years. That's like you need to survive, you need to do
yeah,
these
and
things.
especially you need to survive when you know you're not going to.
Right,
That
exactly.
trick of the mind where you're like, no, I'm not going to survive, and yet I need to survive, and I'm scared of the end, or I was scared of the end, and yeah, I especially struggled, and maybe you can feel similarly. Like I struggled with coming from a lack of tradition. Like I didn't have a big backbone of like what to do in the face of birth or death or life, or, and I really, and this is such a cheesy thing, but I like really did learn on a dance floor, like what it was to like feel exalted and what it was to also be crestfallen and perished from the world in small ways. That I feel like is the only way the only way I have been able to react to the death of my peers has been in kind of like in concert, in like in sound, and it just boggles my mind that people feel otherwise, that like people need to put someone in a coffin to know that they've departed is the weirdest thing to me, but each their own for sure.
Right. Yeah, this segues kind of nicely into this other thing I wanted to ask you about, which is
Hmm.
that in 2020 you were named artist resident at SETI, which stands for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and what does that sort of entail?
Yeah, it came about because I gave a talk. I gave a sound meditation at oh gosh, why am I blanking on its name? Sonar, at Sonar Festival in Spain, and
Mhm.
it was the same year they were hosting some people from NASA and some people from SETI and other places. And I'm so happy to have had like deeper conversations with some of those guests and be able to eventually become an artist in residence at SETI, was a profound honor, but also like a really intriguing difficulty, whereas a lot of times music is here to speak about the ineffable and really get into the corners and cracks where there isn't. necessarily any proof, but a lot of feeling. And SETI is kind of similarly natured. It's like the supposition that there is intelligent life. We're aiming antennas up, not just because it's fun to listen out to the chaos or noise, background noise of the universe, but because this idea out of billions of stars, there will be other life, and that if we're not listening, there's no knowing. But very much also in the same function and facet of like someone like Pauline Oliveros with their like deep listening activities, our simple looking upward to the stars also created the aliens that we're looking for, at least in the sense that those are the only aliens we're going to be able to get thus far with our antennas, will be the ones that we will figure out and find, not to discount the countless other variations of multidimensional whatever beings. But specifically with SETI, it's just like such a wonderful affirmation of what our like high, like to my mind, what our highest hopes as a humanity can be, of like a non-government backed, but maybe government supported at times outcome, looking for something that's outside of ourselves. Whereas most of the time, like when we talked about commerce, it's like so it relies on being self-facing and kind of self-deprecating, and yeah, the ego gets really strong, and we're the primary figure, we're the center of the solar system when it comes to ego. But with something like SETI, it's like you have to dispose that and put it that we are just in our tiny corner of the universe, and really ignorantly moving about, flailing these limbs in a way that like sometimes makes that we can walk around, but sometimes means that we're just having a tantrum on the floor. So
Right.
anyways, being an artist resident just gives me this kind of outcome of trying to react to all these like big ideas pretty much just with like the same way I would with any kind of record, is just sonifying feelings and thoughts, and just like maybe bringing some more awareness to SETI's goals in specific ways that I think are really kind of beautiful at times. Because
Yeah, I think
yeah.
it's a great goal to have, but I'm a little bit of a pessimist just because of how like huge space is. It's just
Hmm.
so hard to even conceptualize. Like for instance, one I don't know if this is actually a fact, but it's something that I heard once upon a time, is that if like you had two universes and they collided, like literally nothing would happen. They would just pass through one another because there's so much empty space. Like the chances of anything hitting anything is like apparently extremely low.
Hmm. 100%.
Which makes me think like fuck, and we're looking for other life in that much vastness. Like
Hmm.
this seems like such an impossible task.
Well, there's two things, right? One idea is that we're looking in really inefficient ways, and we're getting orders of efficiency every year, that we're attempting this both through the science, but also through the arts. Now, I know this is one of those ridiculous concepts, but again, simply looking means that we are more likely to find. And that's, of course, like a very easy, like kind of bit of reason that we can provide. But equally, every time you look again with another ear, another eye, another outcome, you are increasing your chances.
Right.
And then also, if aliens want to be found, if aliens are in the kind of, and whatever we term as alien, obviously we have this idea of ourselves out there rather than the kind of
I mean,
magnitude of life that could
technically,
exist.
according to the US government, I am an alien. That's what it says on
Careful
my
there.
visa.
Yeah. Oh, no. Oh my gosh. Well, indeed, that's the kind of thing. It's like there's all kinds of different ideas of alienness, and the way that we're also now being exposed to UFOs constantly in the air around us, but it's very likely to be of Earth origin. But it's still like these are aliens, often of life, that have different ideals and different outcomes. And to be paying attention to that at all, and having an alien like yourself giving us testimonial on a dance floor or elsewise, is really valuable to us. It enriches all of our experience. And so it isn't necessarily that we're looking for little green men, but the idea of just any kind of way by which intelligence might be bouncing around the universe. Like we're sending out radio waves constantly into the universe, and it's very likely that even though obviously it would just be a small blip, the way it kind of creates overall patterns, we would be the easiest to detect thus far of what we've been looking for, because
Mm.
we're actually outputting the same thing that we're listening for. We are the transmitter, we're the speaker as well as being the antenna, as is often the case. Anyone that's had to make their headphones into a microphone on a DJ booth understand this very well. Both
Right, right.
systems are very
Just
work
wire it
both ways.
backwards and it's, yeah,
Hmm.
transducer in the opposite form.
Totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think really it ends up being, we may never find alien life because of the infinitely small chances, but we will better ourselves in the process. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a like a noble cause that's worth doing for sure. Um, all right, let's switch gears massively to questions that come from Discord.
Mm, nice.
which is always pretty hit and miss. Sometimes these are good, sometimes they're not. All right, somebody asks, do you have a favorite song that you've made?
Gosh, no. They're all strange, misshapen children. Um, I will say that it's interesting how, and maybe you feel similarly, the songs that get regarded, that get seen by others. Like I have plenty of songs that like seemingly never get heard. Like I can look at the Spotify numbers,
Right, you
I
have
can see the
20.
album sales.
Yeah, I looked at your Discog. You have like 23 albums and 17 EPs, and then
Yeah,
a
I have
bunch
a
of
few.
remixes. Bunch of, yeah,
And
it's
yeah,
crazy.
exactly. I have a few things. I'm not to Mad Libs level yet. I'm not to Merzbow or Muslim Gauze or like. There's all these bands that I always think of as being truly prolific. Um, but yeah, I'm somewhere along those lines, and I have
In a
plenty
way,
of
though,
music.
Merzbow is kind of playing the quantity game on easy mode, right? Like it's noise music. You can easily, I think, it's
Hey,
all
even if you play the video game on easy mode, you still finish the same game
right.
usually.
That's true.
Just saying. And that is a life hack. There's those, like what is it? Wolfpack put out like records that were blank, that were just
Right.
like like no noise, and they would get counted on Spotify. And I guess that's valid from a certain kind of idea, but annoying and valid at the same time.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I have songs that because other people have emotional reactions to them have weight to me. Or that experience song that I did that got changed into accordion. Like it's an easy one to point at as being like, well, that's important to me. It it generates ears. It rallies people to a cause. It gets some awareness towards fragility in electronic music that doesn't often kind of come together. It doesn't often get seen or regarded. And like so it's that stuff is important to me, but I would say it's no more important than and oftentimes because every song to me is a time machine. Every song is like an exact registration of both like where I've played it, when I conceived of it, the kind of elements that contributed towards it, the samples that I might have used. It's all like this crazy, like really personally important to me. So I would just I
So
would reflect back to the person who asked the question, like what's important to them, and then it's like that's important to me, and that's
right, right.
fine.
It's also an impossible question to answer. Again, going back to free will and determinism. If somebody asks me that question of what's my favorite track, like I'm completely confined to what I can even think of in that
Mm.
moment. So I'm like, all right, I can maybe think of the last couple albums I released. But every now and then, I mean, I dig into my arsenal. I'm like, oh, fuck, this is a track that I actually released that I totally even forgot that I wrote. So I was not free to pick that one when you
Yeah.
asked me this question, and so on. So yeah, it's a really hard question to answer, actually.
It is, but I do love these kind of thought experiments because I love it, especially when I hear an artist, because I think it's impossible, and you've obviously registered similarly. But I hear some artists who are like this one, and I'm like, how do you, how do you know so quickly, and how do you know so certainly?
Right.
And I just yeah, I again I think of myself as an unreliable narrator in the sense that maybe I'll have a different answer if you ask me at a different time, but for the
Mm.
longest it's been I don't know. But
I
I do love when people have any kind of like they know they have it in their back pocket.
Well, I've come up with the truest or the most reliable answer for me is just whatever the last thing I made was, is usually
And
my favorite thing.
And that's a fine one. And I also love it when people are like, that next record you all haven't heard yet. This is the best thing I've ever done. It's
Right.
like, fine, okay, I get it. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah, the next thing I'm gonna make is probably gonna be my favorite thing.
yeah, by your own logic, absolutely. And I hope
Right.
so.
Cool. So another question is, do you think you'll want to make more projects like what ones? I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, What Wands Won't Break was my last LP.
Okay. And what was
And
different from that project than other LPs that this person thinks it's like a project that is like something?
yeah, so I read a book called Black Noise. And the name of the author escapes me because I'm terrible with names. It'll come to me in my dreams later. And it really esteems this idea that a lot of the technology we use, music technology, has been so influenced by basically white culture that it becomes this idea where a lot of, yeah, so for instance, a lot of the mixing equipment we use was like exactly conditioned to be able to mix an orchestra. Like seemingly the in the order of hierarchies, like orchestral music and especially the recording of orchestral music is this like of this certain audio quality, this audio fidelity, this like audiophile idea that that's like perfect, and that everything else kind of resonates like for and against that. And so things like induced digital distortion or like saturations or like kind of things that break and go into the red as being a technological feature that has been like trying to be written out versus like the real world culture. Whereas like
Right.
if you think about music cultures around the world, like it's loud and noisy and cantankerous, and like we've decided that the recording hall with its lack of noise is like perfect, and it's just all
Right.
these like interesting ideas. And especially this Black Noise book really talked about hip hop culture in the 90s, that DJs would like indeed slam it into the red just to get the bass to feel a certain way, because that was what would work in like a block party situation, or would work in a concert in an adornment to voices. And so you need this kind of this outcome. And so I made a record that was like leaning into that really heavy. If you ever get a chance to check any of the tracks, like I am
I'll,
sorry.
I'll check it
And I
out
love,
after
and it's
this.
also like super slinky. It's like no melody, it's just rhythm. It's like 22 tracks of like rhythm, like rhythm hitting you in the head. And some of them have like little bits of melody or little feints of things, but it's like really the most different record I've done since maybe my very early work. And I love it. I love that this is still possible and I could actually surprise people, especially off the heels of like what is a fairly extensive group of ambient records I did for Brainfeeder. Um, to be able to like still surprise some people
Mm.
and have it used in like breakcore sets, and like noise musicians were loving it. And then all my like true blue fans from like, from the mid aughts and stuff were like angry at me because it was like that came up in my shuffle and it was loud and it hurt me. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but also like awesome. Like that's incredible. That's even possible.
Yeah, I think people forget how much music technology actually influences us. Like for instance, in a DAW, like the fader will be green, or
Mm-hmm.
the level meter will be green, and then it will go red, right? And like this is driven into us from a young age with like traffic lights. It's like green means go, red means stop.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think people kind of immediately when they see that red are like, oh, I've heard before, in other instances of life that are not artistic or musical, that red is not good. So like, let's not do that. It's like, well, yeah, why did they even put that feature in there if it's
It absolutely, and there's certain other aesthetic choices that I really do like, and I hate and I like. It's like when I'm in a public space and someone's playing super loud music off their cell phone, they're just blasting it. It's like annoying me because it's interrupting my personal space. It's like my little bubble has been popped, and like here they are inserting themselves, and I just can't stand it. And yet at the same time, it's like, wow, what a crazy ego trip move to be like, you were listening to my music now, and it's important. And whereas maybe your crutches, you could put your noise canceling in and like ignore me, but I'm going to be so like vibrant in the space that you can't stop. And of course, it's a very dangerous prospect in many ways, but then equally, it's intoxicating to think about the possibility.
Yeah, I'm
So
not sure those people on the trains and buses who do that shit are actually thinking like you're listening to my music now. I think they're just completely not self-aware and like not thinking about the people around them at
I
all.
like to think the best of people, and
Right.
I want to think that they're like giving me insight into their secret world that they would normally feel that they would
Mm.
have to hide. So
That's
I'm
yeah, it's a good
they're
way to
giving the
look at
gift
things.
of yeah, giving me, as long as it's not for too long, then I feel better about it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
At least gives you something to think about if you're giving people the benefit of the doubt rather than just jumping to conclusions, I suppose.
Hmm. Yeah.
All right. Next question says, do you or what part do you instinctively start with? I guess they mean when writing a tune.
Hmm.
Someone said they know that I've mentioned that I have many songwriting strategies, but where do you find your primary source of inspiration?
Yeah, I do find oftentimes that a lot of my records are coalescing certain, both like I have an overwhelming thought or impetus, as well as technique that ends up being like the kind of thing that binds a whole record together. So sometimes it's an instrument. Some records are obviously like you can tell that I use a lot of guitar. I use a modified tuning. I do a lot of electronic techniques, but still, it's like the guitar was like the center impetus of like the songwriting, and it probably did start on a guitar, or it probably really quickly got to a guitar, and that's why it kind of came together as a record. And equally, like I have that for drum machines, I have that for pianos. I mean, I have a lot of records, so, but each record does seem to be like one exertion of an idea and a technique kind of that find each other. So oftentimes, like I'll have like a new soft synth, or I'll have a new hardware piece, and it'll be like maybe this is gonna be a record, maybe not. Like I don't know. I don't buy it with the intention that like, oh, this thing is gonna like be the thing that does it. But suddenly it will kind of appear, like it'll start to happen, and like ideas that maybe I've put into the back burner for a while will start to like foment and be like, oh, this is going to be that thing. And suddenly it's just like everything starts to happen really quickly. And that's one thing about music making to me is I know when it happens fast and viscerally that it's good. And not to say that the music's good, but like the act of creation feels good, and
Mm.
I feel like swept up in it. And so when it's hard and when it takes time and when it's like, even when the equipment is like really divey, like menu divey, I'm like, I'm turned off. Like, nah, this isn't going to be my thing. And so I really appreciate people who have a technical controller aspect that allows them to like, really figure out like, I'm going to have like 17 kicks that are interchangeable and I'm going to like figure out how to perfect them all. Like for me, it's just like blare, blam, and then maybe later I can do the replacement or figure things out and still
Yeah,
try to get like really through composed, hopefully really deeply intricate pieces. But that like that incessant necessity is probably the most through thread of any of the techniques, is that like as long as it's happening in like the quickness, it's like it's worth it no matter what the instrument is or our idea.
that's interesting because I mean, like we just talked about, you look at the best of people on the train who blast their music. I look at the worst of them. But in this case, with challenging things, we think the opposite way.
Mm.
You look at a challenge as like, I'm probably not going to do that, and I look at something usually as like, if this is challenging me, that's a good trigger for my brain to know that this is important for me to do,
Mm.
because
That's
it's like
awesome.
something that's going to stretch me a little bit and something that's going to potentially lead me into new ground that I haven't been to before, because this feels uncomfortable.
I don't think the discomfort is something to shy away from, but discomfort I think is a lot easier to get to than comfort.
Yes.
And so I like to be in the discomfort. I like to be right away in the discomfort and just like live there. But and comfort feels weirdly like you have to be very preparatory. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So
All
I think
right,
we
next.
agree a little bit more than we disagree on that one, but maybe.
Yeah. Yes, possibly. Yeah, usually I kind of agree with you with menu divey shit. I kind of hate that, especially on modules, man. It's like, Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
like some of the modules that, yeah, they're
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah.
Especially once you get an SD card in the module, it's over. Menus
Yeah.
forever.
Hmm.
Somebody says, how do you balance your personal and work life?
It's increasingly hard, especially between child and work. I find that I have less and less time for the needfulness of a music making. Um, I am really deliberate now about my creative act, and I will find any time that I can find that sliver. But I'm very deliberate when I'm in that moment to kind of really be about it. But with the needs of a child and the kind of constant aspect of the working world, like I don't just check out of work and like I'm done. Like there's like a barrage of emails or kind of sometimes papers or music to grade or these other things that just really cause it. So I've kind of succumbed to having a much slower work regime and finding my muddled a little bit in that way. Like I think I'm going to have a record out before the end of the year, but like this would be one of the first years I don't have like a real strong EP LP that I can really stand on. I mean, I'm really proud of the work that will come out in November, but it's just different. It's not the same. Like I'm going to do a bunch of touring around it, and I'm going to do like it's just going to be this thing that's carved out. Maybe there'll be some outcomes from it, but maybe not. And I'll have some more music out too and some other remixes and stuff. But it's just different. It's different than having like this kind of solo meditation time that I can really just like figure it out. So I'm wonderfully struggling in the humanity of what's going on, but I think many people are. So I don't feel
Mm.
that different. Whereas sometimes before in my musical life, where I was just like I would twiddle my thumbs for 12 hours a day, just thinking about music all the time. And I loved that, but it did make me feel sometimes like I'm having a very different experience than other people around me.
Right. Yeah, interesting. So you think like now that you have a child and stuff, you're going to lean more into staying as a teacher at Berklee rather than going to back to touring once that
I think
resumes.
I think so, partially just because I'm finding so much pleasure in giving some of these ideas and knowledge and just being there for that sense of discovery. Like I don't even think necessarily I
Mm.
teach people things. I just like am like a sounding board for their own discovery.
Yeah, actually,
And
yeah.
that's it's an incredibly heady feeling. Like I think those people haven't experienced that before and I hadn't that much prior to this moment. Being just present when somebody has a eureka moment, even if it's something I've realized in the past or something that like is kind of intuitively like, oh, this is kind of low hanging fruit or like, a high concept or whatever. Just being there when those like gears come together, it like feels like a flash of electricity in my veins.
Mm.
It's fun.
I agree. Yeah, and it also, I think, just like I experienced the same thing when I was at Berkeley Valencia. It's just people there were yeah, just having, you could just like feel everybody thinking. I guess
Hmm.
um,
The shared
which
experience, the shared ideal it really reminds me of shows where like people want to have a good time. They come to the show having a good time. You're on stage, and the only thing you can do is fuck it up for them.
Right.
I mean, like they're gonna have a good time, kind of with or without you, as long as you don't mess up their flow. And it's
Mhm.
the same thing at school. It's like everybody's like discovering, learning, making music. They're all on the same page, and the only thing you can do is just like give them a bummer of a class, and then just don't do that.
Right. And also, yeah, another thing I found being at that school is just because, all these people were people who had finished already at Berkeley, Boston, and then came over to Valencia to do the
Mm,
masters. Just fuck, man, some of the skill of the players there, it's like, man, I'm just getting musically dunked on by all these people.
I
Like
love it.
they're like, I'm the one with the music career, and like there's no way that I'm like more skilled
The
than
only thing you
half
have
the
to remember
class I'm
though, that
teaching.
again, like just like with money, like money is a very short game and time is the long game, quite by its own definition. And much the same way, like you've spent time doing this, and even if it hasn't resulted in these kind of demonstrable skills that you can kind of see in others, they just don't have that time that you have. And they
Mm,
never will. They never, as long as you stay in it, they never will catch up to you.
right, right.
It's a weird thing to know.
Yeah, yeah, experience does in a weird way trump uh knowledge. But then again, it's like different people learn different things at different times, so it's kind of like, yeah, I think
But that's
you're
the thing is though, they might have the knowledge, but they'll never have your experience. They're very different
right.
things.
Yeah, that is true. All
That
right,
doesn't
the
mean that you're
last
valuable late in life, but we all will be disposable, hopefully. But yeah,
right, yeah, until we figure out the tricks of old aging, or yeah, I think nootropics might play part of that. We'll see.
maybe. I don't know if I want to microdose for the rest of my life, but still,
Right,
yeah,
or Neuralink maybe. Yeah,
yeah, maybe,
we'll see.
maybe.
All right, last question is tea or coffee?
Coffee all day, all the
Coffee.
time. I'm like so incredibly like I tour sometimes for music, but I tour for coffee is what I tour for. I love the fact that
Ah.
I've been all over the world for all these different coffee cultures, all these different way that it's served, all this different way that it's prepared. I've had yeah, coffee in places where coffee isn't served, and coffee culture is like a ungainly, energetic thing. Much of America is much like this, and I adore that. I adore the way that indeed like a hallucinogenic drug is now like completely mainstream, and people are doing it constantly. An adaptogenic,
Mm,
insanely powerful chemical is like put into our body like a million fold. It's controlling us. It's part of us. It's like yeah, I'm a big coffee person. I like tea too. Don't get me wrong. It's just not coffee. And
right.
good coffee, especially as it's like created like from farm to table, to use that silly term, is like an incredibly. It's like one of the most aspirational things that we have done as a humanity is like not just tamed this thing because really there's no taming it. It's just like worked with it to create an environment that creates this one outcome, and it's just, it takes so many like really diligent hands on on this basically this very fallible product, the not even product, this very fallible plant
Mm.
to get to us is just incredible, especially when you have the sublime experience at the end of it of drinking a truly good cup.
Totally. Yeah, I remember one day actually seeing on your social media you posted like a Google Maps link where you're like, "Here's all the best coffees I've found in each city," or whatever.
Yeah.
I was having this conversation with my girlfriend last night, who's been getting massively into nootropics,
Hmm.
and she was saying that tea holds like a lot more theanine than
Yeah.
coffee, and some people are really sensitive to theanine and have this really like positive experience with it.
Hmm.
And other people just do not, and it's just very hit or miss. So I think that people who are more into tea, maybe just to those people who are more affected by theanine than
Well,
caffeine.
also we do a lot to like destroy the delicate chemical compounds in tea. Like we scald it all the time. We do all kinds of things to use. We're on kinds of paper in terms of like it's both its drying as well as its like bagging, and that kind of stuff will end up disrupting the kind of the pleasant, like if we could all use gaiwan, I think is the kind of phrase for this, like
For the
especially like a
tea,
Chinese
yeah,
style
the
service,
like little cup thing we
little cup, but also the way that you kind of you boil
steep it.
and steep it, exactly, multiple steeps and all these things. Like it actually is really an incredible way of receiving tea, and it really does change. Like if you ever have the chance to have like one of these like really high quality teas that you can have like 5 or 6 steepings of,
Mhm.
it's like going on this entire journey with the plant. It's incredible.
Yeah, I have this giant brick of pu'er that I do through a
Nice.
guy one quite often.
There you
Um,
go. This perfect.
yeah,
You know the thing then. I just feel
yeah,
like the
and
same thing's possible on coffee. It's just you have to be equally careful and diligent.
Yeah, during this conversation with my girlfriend last night, she was saying that there was a pretty strong correlation between when caffeine got like heavily introduced and when science started advancing a lot. It's like in the 1600s or whatever, people just started slamming coffee during the Renaissance era and just like
But
hammering out like,
they've also found the same correlation between revolution as well.
mm,
Like you have
right.
more uplift and kind of disruption of society based on caffeine consumption too.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, everyone was getting a lot of work done, but they were also having a lot more energy to have arguments, probably.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
Well,
All right.
cool, man. Um, Dude, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an amazing chat. I think this has been one of the more like conceptual, like high level, heady chats that I've had on this podcast, which is awesome. Like usually I get more into the exactness of like, also what has your travel schedule been like lately and stuff like that. But I really, this podcast, honestly, like this is the perfect, like this is what I want this
Oh,
podcast more to be like, is these very like heady conceptual ideas versus just this kind of you know, uh, talking about exactly what I've been up to lately and what the other
well,
person has been up to lately.
I mean, to be quite frank though, when I think about you, I think about you in these kind of conceptual standpoints. I think you are an artist that differentiates yourself because you were not just a song or a sound, but you're a person of nuance and some complication. And I appreciate being able to follow you through your journey on social media and also meeting you in person. And to be able to do this podcast has been great. I really appreciate it. And if anything, I mean, you should feel like, I don't know, the topics you brought up and some of the ideas espoused, it's just fascinating. So I want hopefully more people to hear it. And I'm excited to be taking part today and indeed following up as you post more shows. I appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise, man. Well, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to go ahead and send you this recording.